Bonjour.
Welcome to a new episode of So French, a podcast about the twists and turns, intrigues and insights to all things French.
Every 2 weeks we select the best, most interesting and fascinating of French news stories, all brought to you from our studio in the heart of Paris.
Loads of politics coming up in this edition. We'll tell you about the scandal, the latest scandal, involving the presidential hopeful François Fillon.
And most of those politicians we talk about in this show are men. There are actually relatively few women participating in French politics. We'll discuss that as well.
And of course, Maud Descamps brings us a fresh French word of the day.
But first, after the huge electoral success of the right-wing primaries in November, this weekend it was the French left's turn to take to the polls in the first round to pick their candidate for the presidential election in April and May. And it was a surprise win by Benoît Hamon.
Je voudrais remercier tous ces électeurs de gauche qui ont démenti les pronostics les plus négatifs et qui sont venus voter à ces primaires.
Now, this wasn't really expected because everybody thought that Manuel Valls, the former prime minister, was going to win. What's so special about Benoît Hamon that suddenly he won?
Yeah, what is so special about him? We don't really know, but he managed to actually. He was presented as this third man in this primary contest, behind Manuel Valls, the former prime minister, and Arnaud Montebourg, a former minister as well, sort of in the same category, one would say, as Benoît Hamon. Both left the government in protest, or were thrown out of the government after protesting, maybe we should say. But Benoît Hamon has managed especially over the last weeks, we can remember this has been a very, very short campaign ahead of these primaries, but to actually unite and put some enthusiasm into these primaries. He got thousands of people to join his meetings, and he created a real buzz in social media, and he managed to bring up his issues as those that were the most discussed in media. So, well, we can talk about a little bit maybe what is his actual program.
It's interesting because he was actually the only candidate of the six men and only one woman, who proposed some interesting ideas. Maybe they were not realistic. For instance, he wants a universal revenue for everybody, about 750 euros a month, with no conditions. He's also in favor of legalization of cannabis. He's also he wants to shorten the French work week from 35 to 32 hours, and he also wants to tax robots because they're very bad taxpayers. So it may sound a little bit strange, these ideas, but at least he was having some intellectual ideas to give a new life to the Socialist Party, who's basically dead.
Exactly, and he blew some energy into that core socialist voters who feel very, very disappointed with François Hollande's politics, who don't think that he has socialist approach as a president. So.
Yeah, and they expressed their disappointment by punishing basically Manuel Valls, who got only 30% of the votes, and he left the government in December as a prime minister because he thought he would win easily the nomination, but it's not really the case. Face each other next week on Sunday the 29th for the final and decisive round, and the choice is very simple. Well, at least if you listen to Manuel Valls, this is what he said when he had lost.
Un choix très clair se présente désormais à nous et à vous, mes chers compatriotes. Le choix entre la défaite assurée et la victoire possible.
So the choice between a sure defeat or a possible victory, but it looks like who's going to win, Sara?
Well, you remember Benoît Hamon got about 36% in this weekend's vote, Manuel Valls 31%, but behind Benoît Hamon has now rallied the third contester, Arnaud Montebourg. If the 17% that voted for him will follow his indication and vote for Benoît Hamon, well, there looks like we have Benoît Hamon as a winner.
Yeah.
He also received the endorsement from Martine Aubry, which is a very heavyweighter in the Socialist Party, and she said that she will also her and her entourage will also vote for Benoît Hamon. So, well, nothing's over until it's over, but it looks like for the moment that there is some wind in the back for Benoît Hamon.
Does he have a chance in April? On the 22nd?
Well, that's another issue. It doesn't really look like it, does it? No. According to all polls, the socialist candidate would actually only come in 5th in the first round of the presidential elections, behind Marine Le Pen, behind François Fillon, the conservative candidate, behind the far left candidate, Jean-Luc Mélenchon, who decided not to participate in this primary, and maybe most importantly, behind Emmanuel Macron, also someone who describes himself as a leftish candidate, who would also actually be in front of the socialist candidate.
So, of course, it's not sure yet who will win the presidential election in April in France, but it certainly won't be Benoît Hamon of the Socialist Party.
And this brings us to the word of the day, because Maud, tell us, what is the word that you have picked for today?
Yes, frondeur, which we could translate, I guess, by slingers. It is the name given to a group of French MPs who didn't agree with the Prime Minister Manuel Valls' policy. And actually, the very first time we heard about les frondeurs, it was under Jean-Marc Ayrault's government. So it is quite a curious word, frondeur, and there are several meanings for this word. A frondeur was the one actually who threw stones during the war and battles. The Scottish writer Walter Scott actually wrote about them in his very first novel, Ivanhoe. Another meaning, which is more a derivative of the first one, is someone who criticized the authorities, which is the meaning we were looking for here. I don't know if you knew that, but there is a historical period in France called La Fronde. It was a series of civil wars between 1648 and 1653. The king had to face a combined opposition of the princes, the nobility, the parliaments, and most of the French people. And La Fronde was the final attempt of the French nobility to protest the king, but they lose. And the emergence of absolute monarchy was then facilitated. So I'll let you now, Stefan, draw any parallel you want between this historical front and the one the Socialist Party is going through at the moment.
Thank you very much, Maud Descamps. Frondeur, today's word of the day.
Now, this wouldn't be so French if we didn't have a political scandal. This time it's François Fillon who is in turmoil. The satirical weekly Le Canard enchaîné revealed that the wife of the former Prime Minister and presidential hopeful had a so-called emploi fictif, or a fake job. According to the weekly, Penelope Fillon, that's her name, earned around €500,000 over a period of 8 years as the assistant of her husband in Parliament, and she allegedly earned another €100,000 as a contributing editor for a magazine for which she published just 2 literary reviews. Fillon reacted on Wednesday.
Je vois que la séquence des boules puantes est ouverte. Je voudrais simplement dire que je suis scandalisé par le mépris et par la misogynie de cet article. Alors parce que c'est mon épouse, elle n'aurait pas le droit de travailler?
That was François Fillon saying that the episode of throwing stink bombs had begun. He also said that it was perfectly legal to employ his wife, and he accused Le Canard of misogyny. The prosecutor for financial crimes deemed the allegations serious enough and has opened a preliminary investigation, while Fillon has promised to hand over any documents to prove that the couple did nothing wrong. In French politics, indeed, it is not illegal, and it's actually even quite common to hire family members when you're an elected representative. In 2014, the Assemblée, the French lower house, employed 52 spouses and 60 children of MPs. But the question here in this particular case is whether Fillon's wife has done any real work for the taxpayers' money. And it doesn't really look like it. Penelope Fillon herself has actively promoted an image of a stay-at-home mother of 5. And only 3 months ago she claimed in an interview that she has never played any active part in her husband's political career. So more or less confirming the story. At the Assemblée, one of his staff told the Canard enchaîné that she has never worked with Penelope Fillon and knew her only as the minister's wife. One would think that Marine Le Pen, the leader of the Front National, would benefit from Fillon's troubles. But since the scandal erupted, she and other party officials have been rather discreet. With a reason. She is herself under investigation by the fraud police of the European Union for having employed friends and relatives with European money. And those employees never showed up either in Brussels nor in Strasbourg. Fillon has been a member of parliament since 1981, and he has always tried to be an exemplary politician. He was a prime minister from 2007 to 2012 under President Nicolas Sarkozy. Fillon beat his former boss in the Republican primaries in November, and according to most polls, he would win the presidential election in May this year. But with this publication by Le Canard Enchaîné, it looks like his chances to become the next president of France have seriously diminished. More politics now. We've seen in the socialist primaries that there were a lot of white men participating, only one woman, and
it was the same thing.
It was the same thing on the right, yeah. And so lack of women, lack of diversity in politics. Is France an exception? Well, actually, more or less, but not really. There was a huge study recently amongst 23,000 elected politicians across Europe. Sara.
So this is not maybe the most scientific study that has been made, but it's one of few actually that has been made across Europe on the diversity of politicians. So it was journalism students who decided to have a look at 23,000, as you said, elected politicians. And the
all
way
around Europe.
All across Europe, exactly. Yeah. And what they did is that they actually just took pictures of these politicians and they looked at them and they said, who looks like a traditional politician, of the stereotype politician that you have? And then they say yes or no. And in that way, they managed to give some kind of a ranking of the European countries. And it turns out, actually, that France comes out as the third to last in this ranking.
Which countries were more conservative?
The last country is in this ranking was actually Hungary, which is maybe not a huge surprise for those who've been following Hungarian politics a little bit, and Czech Republic. But then there is France, the champion of human rights and of equal
equality,
rights. And one of the reasons why this study could only be made through these photographs is because here in France you are not allowed actually to collect data on people's ethnicity, religion. So the only way that it can actually perform this kind of study is through looking at pictures.
Yeah, well, it's not surprising because you only have to look at the Assemblée Nationale, the lower house, or even the Senate, to see that it's mostly old white males who are in the parliament. So it's maybe it's not a scientific study, but it does say a lot.
The problem is that no one's talking about this.
No.
I must say that this it's almost a non-issue in France.
Yeah.
The lack of women. I mean, when you see these 14 in total candidates for the primaries and two women, and no one is really. I mean, it should be a massive issue. Yeah. And then, well, you have that issue, and then of course all they all come from the same type of social economic background.
Yeah, same schools, same networks. Sometimes they're married together. You know, it's a real French problem. And even in Rwanda and in Afghanistan, there are more women in the parliament than in France. So. Well,
but in France, you do have the lists when it comes to elections have to, since the beginning of 2000, they have to be they have to be half-half.
Yeah, on local level, but not national yet. And actually, it's even worse because if you don't have as many men and women as a party, then you have to pay a fine. And for instance, Les Républicains, François Fillon's Conservative Party, they pay 4 million euros a year as a fine because they don't respect the equality laws and they prefer to pay the fines than to give seats to women. So it's really a very serious problem, and the politicians don't really like to change that situation.
Oh, the interesting thing is that one's wondering why there are not more people protesting against this, because it should be of everybody's interest, and especially in women's interests and in...
Absolutely. Well, maybe it's a very sad reflection of this society. And from French politics, we go to American politics. Although we stay in France, American Republicans living in Paris celebrated Donald Trump's inauguration. Maud Descamps went into the lion's den.
It's in a cozy bar of the 18th arrondissement in Paris that the American Republican Overseas Association organized the inauguration night celebration. 2 hours before the opening of the ceremony, a few Republicans already are drinking red wine, talking about the great changes Donald Trump is going to bring to America. Andre, a 20-year-old student who studies in Paris, is expecting a lot, even if Donald Trump wasn't his very first choice.
I flip-flopped. I went from Bernie Sanders in the Democratic primaries to Donald Trump. I think what appealed to me both is that Donald Trump was outside coming in and challenging the establishment. I think the first thing that he should do would be tackling the Syria issue. I look forward to seeing his negotiation and a peaceful resolution to this 6-year crisis.
Not far from Andre, Camilla, who took part in the organization of the night, is also looking forward to seeing Donald Trump in action.
We're very excited, and the work is just about to start. This is the beginning of a big road ahead. He's got a mess to deal with, and so we're going to use this night to celebrate, because it's to work. It's to work we go.
There is no doubt for Camilla and Andre that Donald Trump will bring to America what is best.
Well, that wraps up this edition of So French. We hope you have enjoyed it. Please follow us on Twitter. It's @SoFrenchNews. And if you have any questions or suggestions, send us an email. Our address is sofrench@sofrench.news.
And don't forget to subscribe to our podcast in iTunes or in SoundCloud. And you can also find us in the TuneIn Radio app, and you can share the podcast with your friends. And we have something new. If you like music, we made a Spotify playlist with hip French music. Just search for So French, and then you will find our playlist. We'll be back in 2 weeks with a new episode of So French. We hope you'll join us then. Thanks for listening.
Au revoir.